Well, good morning. It's a privilege to be here this morning. So my name is Aaron, and I will give myself a three-word title, the coal number cruncher, for the state of Kentucky. My actual title is, I don't know, about 20 words or so that are far less descriptive than coal number cruncher. But it's a privilege to be here and talk to you all this morning. It's also an honor because there's a lot of people in this room that know far more about this industry than I do, including Secretary Snavely and Jerry Weisenflue, and many others in this room that I've gotten to know. You all know this industry far better than I do. But what we've done for the past 7 years in looking at coal data, which is when I started about 7 years ago, is to try to ascertain everything we can about every individual coal mine, what coal is being mined, what that coal is like chemically, who's mining that coal, and ultimately where that coal goes. And what I'm going to discuss quickly is some of the past of Kentucky coal production, our present, and then discuss briefly what the future looks like given what we know about current consumers of Kentucky coal. And I don't have a speech or a script prepared, so feel free to raise your hand or just holler out if you have any questions or comments as I start talking about some of this. And if I don't have to stand behind the podium, I won't. So this is a map. We've made many maps, and so I threw some maps in here since you all are, a lot of you are really good at maps, including Brandon, who's taught me a lot in ArcGIS. Thank you, Brandon. This is a map of Kentucky coal production, both our western coal field and our eastern coal field. And what I've done here is sized each ball with the amount of production in a quarter at a given coal mine. And so you can see this moving forwards in time as we approach present day. All of the data that we have, we use multiple sources. We use historical archive data from the Energy and Environment Cabinet and KGS. But for our real-time data, we're using a confluence of Department of Labor, Mine Safety Health Administration data, and also confidential tax filings by coal producers. And ultimately, we check off, one by one, all of the reports for individual coal mines, either with our inspectors at the Energy and Environment Cabinet or with individual coal producers. We literally pick up the phone and call them across the state to verify these data. As you saw those maps, the gray dots represented underground mines and the green dots represented surface mines. As of this quarter, 2016 is closed. We produced this report about 2 weeks ago and stuck it out online. It's called the Kentucky Quarterly Coal Report. As of this quarter, 75% of the coal that's mined in Kentucky is coming from underground mines. There's a couple of reasons for this, but we're seeing some shifting in where coal is produced, and we are shifting more towards the western part of the state, where the predominant means of production is underground. This is what that time series looks like over time. So I joined the cabinet in 2009, and at the time we were working with 2007 data. And that's where I started counting pieces of coal. And we decided, historically we've produced annual statistics of what coal production was. Actually, Jerry Weisenflue helped us with that in our Colfax publication. But we decided because these statistics were moving so fast that we're going to put them out quarterly in our quarterly coal report to keep everyone up to date on what production was and what employment was. And as you can see, there's been precipitous declines in both underground and surface production. We are now producing coal at a rate of 11.3 million tons per quarter, and in annualized terms, that puts us somewhere between 40 and 44 million tons for 2016. So if anyone can remember, does anyone know what the peak production of coal was in Kentucky? Want to guess? Yeah, about 175 million. So we're coming in at, if production holds and there are no mine closures and no slowing in production from here to the end of the year, we'll be at 44 million for the year. So that's putting us at 1939 levels of total production. We hit that 175 in 1990. When I started with the Energy and Environment Cabinet 7 years ago, this pie was flipped. Red here is Western Kentucky, and blue is Eastern Kentucky. Those proportions have shifted drastically. So as many of you know, better than I do, since you guys are really the experts in this, our Western Kentucky coal field, high sulfur, lower heat. Eastern Kentucky coal field, lower sulfur, less than 3%, and higher heat. With the advent of desulfurization systems at our power plants, we've seen shifting from Eastern Kentucky coal, this is generally our more expensive coal, to Western Kentucky coal. Desulfurization systems at power plants, they're about $1 billion a pop, but what it enables the power plant to do is almost completely eradicate any sulfur dioxide emissions at that power plant and burn any fuel that they want, regardless of the sulfur content. And so what we've seen here in Kentucky and across the Kentucky coal market, which is the southeastern United States, we've seen power plants shifting from Eastern Kentucky coal to Western Kentucky coal. And so this pie has shifted substantially in the past couple of years. And this, if we take that pie graph and we stretch it out as a time series, this is what we see. Going back to 2000, Eastern Kentucky coal was being produced at a quarterly rate of about 30 million tons. This is really, really high production. And you can see since 2008, there have been very quick and precipitous declines in Eastern Kentucky coal production. During that same time frame, we actually had significant increases in Western Kentucky coal production. And that's largely due to the beginning of operation of the Alliance Riverview mine in Union County. This is Kentucky's largest coal mine. You can really see that in the time series there. In 2013, Western Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky switched between who was the leading producer. This is the first time we've seen this since 1911. Western Kentucky is now outproducing Eastern Kentucky rather substantially. In 2013, we also saw Union County, because of the Riverview mine, supplant Pike County as Kentucky's leading coal-producing county. Pike County today is the 5th largest coal-producing county in Kentucky. Juxtapose that to 2013, since 1978, Pike County was the leading coal-producing county in Kentucky. So these are very significant and drastic trends. So you can see Union County this quarter producing about 2.2 million tons of coal. And I didn't change the axis there, so you can compare that. Perry County this quarter for the first time overtook Pike County in Eastern Kentucky. The colors there represent whether you're looking at surface or underground coal production. So all of these data, again, are available in our quarterly coal report, and you can download the data from our website as well. What's more significant and more difficult to discuss are the changes in employment that we've observed during this time series. So there are people that mine that coal, and there are families that depend upon that coal production, and Kentucky is seeing a significant decrease in coal mine employment. So what's counted here, I've broken it out into 4 categories. You've got underground miners, surface miners, the prep plant workers, and the office staff that are at the mine. What's missing are the truckers, and everyone that works across the state in the coal industry but not at coal mines, including people that would be here in Lexington, law firms and engineering firms, etc. But just at the coal mines, we've seen coal employment in Eastern Kentucky drop from 15,000 to under 5,000 in a very short period of time. Today, Kentucky has 6,901 coal miners. So that is a significant decrease from about 20,000 a few years ago when I started looking at these data. We've also pushed these employment statistics back in time, and I didn't bring these historical data, but we've been using the Energy and Environment Cabinet's paper archives, literally paper spreadsheets with pen and pencil that go all the way back into the 1800s. And we've gotten a complete picture of what Kentucky coal mine employment looked like all the way back to 1888. And it is fascinating. We are today at employment levels comparable to 1898, when there were 6,000 some odd coal miners in Kentucky. So coal mine employment ramped up very quickly. In the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, we're looking at almost 80,000 people employed at coal mines in Kentucky, and has declined since then for a variety of reasons, and most rapidly towards the end of this time series. Western Kentucky coal mine employment has actually been a lot more stable for the past couple of decades, but we are seeing significant declines over the past 2 years as some very large producers in Western Kentucky have closed or staffed down. So why? This is a map of where Kentucky coal goes. Blue dots are still Eastern Kentucky, red dots are Western Kentucky. And what you'll see is that 90% of the coal that's mined in Kentucky is consumed here in the United States for electricity generation. So make no mistake, Kentucky coal goes to provide electricity across the eastern seaboard. At the beginning of that time series, you would have noticed that, I don't know why this thing is just going to do the whole presentation by itself. Let's see if it'll let me try. So a couple of years ago, Eastern Kentucky coal went all the way up to Maine, Wisconsin, and northern Michigan. And indeed around the world in terms of international shipments, but primarily on the eastern seaboard of the United States. If we fast forward to 2014, okay, stop. If we fast forward to 2014, you'll notice that our market has been reduced quite substantially. But still, our primary consumers are North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So we're tracking each individual shipment using a variety of data sources, everything from confidential tax filings to one of the things that's the most useful is the FERC 423, now EIA 923 fuel shipment receipts, which are very, very useful. And you can see where our market is. So looking at those same power plants that buy Kentucky coal, we started to realize that many of them were closing. In 2009, we started to look at what the future of Kentucky coal production might be. And I'll talk about that briefly, using a lot of assumptions. But this map shows gray dots are power plants where there are no plans or announced closures that we're aware of. But the red dots are where that power plant has either been ordered to close by the federal government or has announced that they're closing in the near future. And this is a significant portion of Kentucky's coal production. The largest consumer of Kentucky coal, does anyone know who that is? TVA. TVA, does anyone know what plant?
Paradise.
Paradise, that's correct. So Paradise burns about 5 million tons of Kentucky coal, and they are closing 2 of their 3 coal-fired generating units. We went down and looked at those. The new natural gas facility that they're building right next door will replace a lot of that coal-fired generation. And that's a significant hit to Kentucky coal production. And the remainder of these power plants as well, these are significant factors. The good news here is that many of those power plants are new. Many of them have installed those desulfurization systems that we already talked about, and many of them have plans to operate into the distant future. And that is good news for Kentucky. We've done a little bit of modeling of looking at which one of these power plants are clean and new and have all of the control systems in place. And we've looked at which plants are susceptible to retirements as well. This is a map of all coal-fired generating units in the United States, again sized by their nameplate capacity. And red dots are where there are announced or known closures of that generating capacity. So tying it all together into a very distant forecast, anytime we predict the future, we're wrong. Okay, we're going to be wrong. So if I predicted what the coal production was going to be in 3 months from now, I would be wrong. So certainly showing a graph that's from 1880 to 2080 is going to be wrong. But taking what we know about those power plants, just with the simple known closures, and also making one big assumption about their age, which is that power plants will live to be 65 years old. We make that assumption because that's the average age that a coal-fired power plant will close, and because there are no coal-fired power plants that are older than 72 years old. Making that assumption that they'll close when they're 65 years old implies that Kentucky coal production will have some significant declines in the future. The good news is, for the foreseeable future, there's some plateauing. That's that coal-fired generating capacity remaining online that we know about. But those announced closures are going to put some significant pressure in this next year on coal production. Into the distant future, why don't we have coal production rising back up in our forecast? Well, there's a variety of reasons, but namely the Clean Air Act Amendment 111B changes. The US EPA has set a limit of 1,100 pounds per megawatt hour of carbon dioxide for new generating capacity. That rule, if it remains in place, effectively prohibits coal-fired generating capacity moving forwards in time. So basically, you can't build a coal-fired power plant anymore without coal with carbon capture sequestration technology, which, as you all know, better than I do, I'm sure, is still unaffordable. So given those assumptions, this is what we see in the future. The Secretary and I were talking about this last night, and it's just very, very simple assumptions, but using those simple assumptions, this is what we see moving forwards. I want to show you one more map. This is all coal-fired generating capacity in the United States. Those orange dots are Wyoming. You can see the Wyoming coal moving forwards. We're moving forwards in time along the same forecast using the age of those power plants. So if 111B isn't changed, or if federal environmental regulations aren't changed, those consumers of Kentucky coal will likely be gone sometime in the near future. So I was surprised I didn't get stopped with any questions. But I'm happy to try to answer your questions. But again, I don't know a fraction about the Kentucky coal production or the Kentucky coal industry as most of you in this room, and certainly Secretary Snavely. I will say, when we were doing the quarterly coal report this a couple of weeks ago, this is the first time I've ever worked with anyone in our office that knew exactly the types of operations that were in play. He knew the players, the names of the mines. He knows this industry inside and out, and that's an honor to work with him on this. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
You did say something about exporting coal.
Yeah.
About the world market.
Yeah, and the Secretary mentioned that last night. So Kentucky coal, we are exporting coal all over the world, but currently a lot of those big buyers of Kentucky coal are also contracting in terms of their contracting economic growth, and they're also contracting in coal-fired generating capacity. Does anyone want to guess who the largest international buyer of Kentucky coal has been historically? Canada, believe it or not. Yeah, and Canada has plans that will eliminate their coal-fired generating capacity within the next few years. Obviously, China and India, it's difficult to predict. All we've done here is a simple extrapolation of what the change in historical international export demand has been, and apply that into the forecast. So very super simple forecast that will definitely be wrong. Definitely be wrong, hopefully be wrong. Yes, sir?
What's the forecast for metallurgical coal?
We've not ever done a forecast for metallurgical coal. And I would leave that to the folks here at KGS. I think there's a lot of more qualified people. The reason we haven't is because the overwhelming majority of Kentucky coal is used for electricity generation here in the United States.
Aaron, did you take into consideration population growth in the world itself? I mean, not U.S. and Europe is mainly zero population growth, but in other parts of the world, population growth, and then, as you know, probably about a third or more of the world doesn't have 24 hours of electricity.
Yeah, definitely. So there are places where there is no electricity grid, massive populations across Africa, and in India where they have unreliable electricity, and they need electricity, and a lot of them are moving to coal, definitely. No, we did not take that into account. The only thing you've seen here is an extrapolation of what our international coal demand has been, and that is a very small fraction of the total Kentucky coal market. So unfortunately, even if China doubles, triples, quadruples their demand for Kentucky coal, that doesn't make up for Paradise. So Paradise alone is such a large consumer of Kentucky coal that even China doubling, tripling, quadrupling their Kentucky coal purchases isn't sufficient to reverse that trend. Some of the good news that's in our quarterly coal report, now I guess I need to sit down, but some of the good news that's in our quarterly coal report is that Kentucky coal is becoming more affordable and more attractive on the international market, and so that may provide some opportunity. Secretary.
Yeah, I have a comment, I'm going to back you up a little bit. The reason primarily that you can't predict the future, and even though you can do an outstanding job of predicting the normal course of business, but since John's in the journalism business and I was in the mining business, both of us have been impacted by technological shifts. So horizontal drilling has had a significant impact as much as the regulatory environment on coal mining and the online ability to do news for free online has done the same thing for the newspaper industry. So I think the good news for all of y'all is that you work in the area of science and research, and the only thing that's going to change this trend is something technological. Because I don't think, from what I see with the younger generation, that their attitudes about the environment are not going to move back in a different direction unless there's something significantly adverse that happens to them, like they run out of electricity. But the hope for the future is technological disruption, just like in every other. And that, we all work in that.
And that might be rarer.
Could be at that point. Well, thank you, Aaron.